So in terms of the policing, we have what is referred to as 4 Ps. So we have a pursue, so that's the detectives that investigate the crimes that get reported through to us. So about 5 years ago, I was a detective constable in South Yorkshire Police, and I was investigating people who are hacking into computers or networks, people who are DDoSing, websites or their mates and things like that, and sort of investigating that type of crime. And now I'm the sergeant in charge of Protect, which is about protecting victims from becoming a victim of cybercrime, and this prevent strategy, so trying to prevent people getting involved in cybercrime, identifying this sort of lucrative career that might be out there from a cybersecurity perspective. And we do a lot of work in terms of prepare. So what are we going to do if somebody becomes a victim of cyber attack? So what we're going to do if somebody attacks Humberside and takes out KCOM and takes out all the internet? What's our response? What's our plan when we do that? So just some facts. So sort of the average age of someone committing cybercrime that we are getting referred to is 17. So it's a very young age of people that are actually getting involved in cybercrime. If you look at things like drug dealing, that's up to like 34, that sort of age. The average age of when someone gets convicted. So it's a very young sort of people that have been involved. £190,000 being stolen every day. So it's a big issue for UK PLC. And obviously we've got people as young as 14 that are actually going to court and getting convicted for these type of offences. And when we've actually started involving and engaging with hackers, we find that 61% of them said they actually started before they were 16. So that's why a lot of the work that we're now doing is more aimed at schools, colleges, universities, that sort of age, rather than older generations. And one small business in the UK hacks every 19 seconds. So this is a real problem for the UK. It's a tier 1 threat from the government. It's like one of their highest threats. And when I talk about cybercrime, I'm talking about what is referred to as cyber-dependent type crime. This is people hacking into computers. This is people, actually stopping computers from working, that sort of stuff. Getting into a computer and either stealing something, so be that data, so I'm going to get in and steal some data, or I'm going to get in and I'm going to convince somebody to send me money to a bank account rather than the bank account they should be sending to. Or it's about preventing someone's access to that computer. So have you heard of ransomware? Yeah. So we've got ransomware where I'm going to get into, as a criminal, I'm going to get into your network, I'm going to encrypt all of your data, and then I'm going to ask for some sort of fee in order for you to get that access to the data back. Ddos, for those of you who've done the quiz, distributed denial of service. So I'm going to have control of a number of computers that are infected, a botnet, and then I'm going to use those computers to target either a website, somebody's internet, to prevent them from actually being able to access or get that machine to work. So I'm going to take that down. And then we have things like, I'll get into somebody's account, I'll change the passwords so that that person then can't access that account and that sort of stuff. Or I'll get into somebody's website and I'll mess around with their website. But in terms of my role in the police, what we are seeing is that this landscape is changing. So we've obviously now got the Internet of Things. So pretty much anything that can be connected to the internet is going to get connected to the internet. So you can have your Wi-Fi enabled toaster. You've got Wi-Fi enabled clothes pegs that have got all these sensors on them, and then they'll tell you from all these sensors that from the moisture sensor and the rain sensor and everything else, that it's raining. I've got an old school thing, it's called a window, and I can see if it's raining, but you'll get it all connected to the internet. The problem you get is that the person who's designed this Wi-Fi enabled toaster or whatever hasn't necessarily got cybersecurity at the front of their mind. So they're creating all this tech, but with that comes a lot of vulnerabilities and risks. Along comes the wonderful world of COVID. Lockdown happens and everyone suddenly either needs to work from home, school from home. So suddenly we're now having to work in a very much different way. The IT guys at the college will be used to having a number of computers around the physical college that they can go around and access and get involved in. As soon as everyone's working from home, it's a lot more complex to manage that from a risk perspective. And similarly, this idea of bring your own device. Yeah. So before I would have had, 70 laptops that were all ThinkPad Lenovo laptops, exactly the same. So the risk is for that device. But now people are accessing it on MacBooks, on iPads, on phones. So actually it becomes a lot more complicated. If we think about who is actually behind the threat, so when we look at this, we've got the idea that this hackers are all these people in hoodies sat in their parents' basements, sort of like doing coding, and that's not the case. Anybody with anything that's connected to the internet can potentially be involved in Computer Misuse Act. When we look at a business, the number one threat for a business is actually staff, insider. So accidental, people who are getting phishing emails, things like that, clicking on links, doing things that they probably shouldn't be doing, which gives these hackers access to the networks. And we do get some malicious insider threat. So from a school perspective, we get people who might want to be somebody who's at the college, who's a bit disgruntled, a bit annoyed, I'm going to take down the school network because it's a bit of a laugh, without necessarily realising the implications of that. So the idea of kind of like pulling the fire alarm, but actually we're doing it from a digital perspective. And then when we look at those people outside of our organisation, we have state-sponsored. So did you all hear about the WannaCry attack, the one that hit the NHS? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I think so.
Think so. So it's about 4 years ago now, so it's relatively old in terms of cybersecurity, but there was a nation-state attack. It wasn't necessarily deployed, but we think it was written by North Koreans, and it was this bit of malware that came out. And the problem was, actually, the NHS was not the target of that attack. What the NHS was a lot of old computers that hadn't been patched or updated and were vulnerable to this method of attack. So when it got out there and it got across the internet, it crippled the NHS along with a number of other businesses. So we're not going to necessarily be targeted by a state-sponsored attack, but we might kind of be collateral damage from that sort of attack. If you look at organised crime, so this is where we have ransomware. So the idea of ransomware is actually this is a business. I'm a criminal, I'm running it as a business. So actually they're quite organised and they'll steal that data for a financial gain. We'll have hacktivists. So have you heard of Anonymous? The latest one that was quite popular with Anonymous is they attacked the Republican governor in Texas around their abortion laws. So they attacked them, got into their website, changed all their website details and things like that, and made a bit of a play around that. We got what are referred to as opportunistic script kiddies, because, as with anything else, there is an idiot's guide on how to do things on the internet. If you want to learn how to do something, you can go onto YouTube, Discord, wherever else, forum sites, and you can find this stuff out. And what we're realising that a lot of people learn how to do something without realising the implications of what they're doing. And then from a business perspective, we also have competitors. So we do have, it's not a criminal, it's somebody else working in a similar field that's actually targeting them. So, when we come to cyber protect, a large amount of work that we do is actually going out and actually engaging with individuals, businesses, charities to try and say, actually, how do we stay safe online? So we've got the National Cyber Security Centre, this sort of national body that are looking at what are the current threats, and how can we best protect ourselves. Because the idea is, actually, if I'm a criminal and I look at UK and I say, well, actually, they're pretty secure, I'm going to go elsewhere to try and target people. So let's try and make ourselves as hard as we can to become a victim of crime. From an individual perspective, there's something called cyber aware. I don't know if you've heard of this. So this is basically simple advice that's going to stop the majority of attacks and threats that come your way. So in terms of sort of protecting your accounts, the number one thing is obviously making sure we've got a strong password for your email, and we're using a strong password using 3 random words. Have you heard of that? Getting some nod, okay. Talk about saving your password in your browser. So most users now, most online users will have over 100 different accounts online with different websites, with different things. And what we're saying is you should have a different account for each of your, a different password for each of your accounts. So if you were to get somebody to accidentally get your username and password, they've only got their username and password for that one account. They don't have it for everything else. Does that make sense? Okay. And then, do you know what I mean when I say two-factor authentication? Yeah, so what's two-factor authentication then?
But usually you get an email to you that you can verify by when.
Yeah, so that idea that it doesn't matter if a hacker gets my username and password, because then they will also need to get that code that will get sent to me, emailed to me, a text message, things like that. Yeah, so there's this second layer of verification that's then going to protect you from doing that. Great website called Have I Been Pwned? I don't know if anyone's heard of that before.
Yeah.
Have I been pwned?
I've been pwned.
You've been pwned?
Yeah.
Okay. So in what way have you been pwned then?
Fitbit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they've been pwned, and then my email got.
Yeah. So the Have I Been Pwned website, it's a great one, run by a guy called Troy Hunt, and he basically collates all these big data breaches. So if you think about the big data breaches, so Fitbit hacked and someone steals all their data, then he will then collate all these different databases and look, and you can go to that website and say, here's my email address, has it ever featured in any of these data breaches? And it gives you that sort of indication to say, actually, yes, that account was hacked, and I know that account I used this password, which I've also used in these other websites, so I now know I need to change my passwords and things like that. And then the last thing we talk about from a national perspective is making sure that we're updating our devices. Everyone's got those automatic updates on your phone, things like that. Yeah, so your app pops up and it says, I need to update. For those of you, when you start getting old and you're working in a workplace, there's something called Patch Tuesday that Microsoft push out all these patches for Windows. Really annoying because you get to work on a Tuesday and your laptop says, I need to reset myself. It's only about 12 o'clock, just as you're in the middle of doing the work. But that's all these things that are identifying the vulnerabilities and making sure that we're not going to get hit. And then backing up your data, this idea that actually, if somebody does get into our network and encrypt everything, we've got a backup of it elsewhere. Okay, so just in terms of passwords, I'm going to, hopefully if it works, show you a video.
Most of our accounts online are accessed by passwords, so make sure your passwords are strong. Criminals can easily guess simple passwords or ones with words personal to you. The best way to create a secure password is to join 3 random words together. The more obscure and memorable, the better. You can make it even stronger by adding numbers and symbols. Feel free to save passwords in your browser or use a password manager. Make sure all your passwords are strong. Plus, it's important to have a separate, unique password for your email address, as you may use that to reset the others. And remember, never share your passwords with anyone, no matter who they claim to be. It's the simple way to stay safe.
So hopefully you guys are using a relatively strong password with your accounts. You've got your 2-factor authentication set up so that the chance of you then becoming a victim of one of the major sort of threats from an individual perspective is going to be really low. When it comes to businesses, obviously it's going to be a lot more complicated because they've got big networks that we're going to have to try and protect. So we have got specific guidance and advice around them and about what they're going to do if they become a victim of a cyber attack. Have they got a response and recovery? And then we do specific ones aimed around certain sort of sectors. So we do a specific one around education. So we're doing a lot of work with schools to actually make sure that the school themselves is cyber secure. In terms of phishing, is anyone here, have you had phishing emails coming through to your accounts and things like that? No. Do you get sort of like rogue text messages coming through purporting to be from people, things like that? Yeah. So what the criminals are very good at is changing the way that they're trying to get people to sort of like hook onto this idea, okay? And it all falls down to this idea of, if I'm a hacker and I want to get into somebody's computer, I can do some vulnerability assessments. I can look at what versions of software people are running. I can look at known exploits of those vulnerabilities for that version of that software. I can write some code. I can then try and deploy that code onto the computer in order to get me access into your computer. Or, more simply, I can get you to give me the access yourself. Yeah. So this idea, we're not going to hack a computer, I'm going to hack a person. Okay. So we're using basic sort of like con artist techniques, what the fraudsters have been using for years, which is people generally are nice, people generally want to be helpful, yeah, and people will do something and they don't want to challenge. So actually, we do it quite a lot when we phone up victims of crime, and I phone up a victim of crime and say, hello, I'm a police officer, I'm phoning you up because you've been a victim of a crime, you've been a victim of a cyber attack or a fraud or something else like that. And then they'll say, oh yes, okay officer. And then I'll say, well, do you want to verify who I am? Because I've just phoned you up out of the blue. How do you know I'm a police officer? No, I trust you. Like, well, that's probably the reason that you might become a victim in the first place. So if you ever get a phone call from anybody in a professional way, a bank, police, school, and you're not certain who they are, say, I'm not certain who you are, and get that challenge, get that verification, because nobody is going to be upset or frustrated by the fact that you're actually verifying their identity, if that makes sense. Gone are the days where, I don't know if you, certainly when we were a lot younger, we used to get the emails from African prince telling us that we were due inheritance. Or you would get, I've won the Indian lottery. That's great. Yeah. You sit there going, amazing. I didn't even know I'd entered the Indian lottery, but apparently I've won £1 million. Just click on this link. Yeah. They're becoming few and far between now because they're a lot more professional. So here we get Netflix. Straightforward, please reset your information. Yeah. Now, if I've just gone onto Netflix, can't remember my password, and I've said, please reset my password, and I get an email through like this, I'm expecting it. If it comes out the blue, then I'm kind of thinking, where's this come from? This doesn't look legit to me. And there's a couple of sort of things. There's a nice big red button there saying click here. Yeah. So it's all this idea of, oh, I can just click there. And all it takes is a second for you to click on that link. It'll probably take you to a malicious site, which looks like Netflix, and then you put in your username and password. Yeah, and then they'll start harvesting those credentials. But what they will do is they'll give you this idea that actually you've got to do it now. So there's an urgency behind it. Yeah, so actually you need to verify it now, and if you don't do it, we're going to stop your account. Yeah, so suddenly I feel a bit under pressure because that's what I've got to do. TV licensing, here we go. You've not paid your license. You need to do it now, and if you don't do it now, you're going to get fined. So there's that financial element. Oh, I don't want to get fined, I better do this. Yeah. So all these sort of techniques that are going on in the background. I mentioned about text messages and things like that. So it's really easy for somebody to spoof where a phone number is coming from. So I can send a text message to you and make it look like it's coming from somebody else. Because your mobile phone is actually helping the criminals at this point, unfortunately. Because what your mobile phone is doing is, if I get a text message from HSBC, and you've had previous messages that your phone thinks are from HSBC, it'll put that text message into the same text message chain. So the criminal has put their text message and made your phone goes, oh, I know HSBC, so they put it into the same one. So it's actually not particularly helping us. So what we're saying is, obviously, if you're getting these sort of text messages through from people, just be aware that potentially they can get easily spoofed. The criminals also know about current trends. So you get COVID vaccine comes through, and suddenly you'll have it there where you've actually got, you know, text messages, spam messages, all that sort of stuff about current events, and they're really quick. The one in the bottom here, that's actually a legitimate one from the NHS track and trace that I got, and it's saying go to tracing.ph.gov.some/. It's like, how do you know if that's legitimate or not? You know, even the government national track and trace isn't particularly easy for you to say whether or not that's legitimate and that one isn't. So yeah, they're very good. And obviously, we're not the only ones that are going to fall foul of it. The idea is that the only people who fall foul of phishing emails and phishing scams are those that don't really know what they're doing. Well, actually, you'll have, you know, multi-million-pound deals for footballers where somebody working at that level, it's very easy because of these social cues. So really, the idea is just think about, are you expecting it? Is there anything behind it? Don't use the links or the contact details within it. So if you get a text message that says phone me, don't use that number. Look up, if it's from your bank, look up what the phone number is for your bank on the back of your card or something else like that. Go from a different source rather than just trusting the information that's on there. And a lot of these big industries will say that what the information they won't request. So that one-time code, that multi-factor authentication, yeah, they will say never tell anybody what that code is. Because what the fraudsters will do is they'll phone up, report to be from the bank, you'll then get the text message from the bank, and then they'll say, what's the one-time code I've just sent you? Well, no, because that would be for your online thing. You shouldn't be then saying it to the person on the phone. Cool. If you do get any, then we've got a national phishing registry. So if you get a suspicious message, you can send it through to the reporting email address. And what we'll do is we'll look at what email address was it used to send that email, and then we can put it onto a blacklist. We'll look at where it's sending you to. So if it's sending you to a dodgy website, we can then take that website down to prevent other people from becoming victims of fraud or cybercrime. And also, if it's a mobile phone number, we can look at taking that off the network and things like that. Cool. So that's kind of what we do from a protect point of view. From a prevent point of view, this is kind of like our cyber choices, which is the logo I'm wearing today. And the role of this is a part of a national campaign aimed at kind of looking at, do people understand the difference between what is legal and illegal online? And then encouraging those individuals to then say, well, you now know what the law is, you know what you should be doing, you can make an informed choice. And if you decide to do things online that are illegal, then, you know, there are going to be ramifications on the back of that. So we're trying to deter and divert individuals away from committing crime. And for those of you who've done the quiz, that's where we're sort of saying, actually, you know, there's a potential sort of career out there for you to promote those sort of legal opportunities. They've done a lot of research into why people get involved in cybercrime. So this is just one of a number of pathways that potentially people might get involved into cybercrime, and this is kind of looking at this gaming sort of idea. So I know I've had quite a few interesting chats out in the foyer around sort of DDoSing your mates and what's legal and what's not legal and things like that. But obviously if you're just on your computer and you're playing games, that's fine, and then you decide to get involved in online gaming, let's say, and then you actually identify there's some ways that I can just modify my game. So I can sort of add some extra code to cheat, yeah, to make myself better. Okay, fine. Start modding it, okay, and then I can potentially start getting involved in sort of actually what happens, you know, I'll go onto some of these forum pages, I'll start looking at actually how I could do this better, and then I'm doing minor things to beat the system. So DDoSing my mates, kicking people offline in order for me to win. Yeah, then we start getting into that idea actually, I can actually potentially get into someone else's account, steal their gold, whatever else it might be from those sort of accounts, and then we're into that financial thing up to that sort of cybercrime. Yeah. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to get in about here and say, before you carry on up that sort of illegal sort of side, let's get involved early doors. Because what we know is that actually the reason that people commit cybercrime is slightly different from most crimes. A lot of it is to do with the fact they're online and this idea that because you're online you're anonymous. And we find that with lots of other types of crimes, so cyberbullying, you know, sextortion, all these other types of things that people are doing online. It's this idea that you don't know who I am. I'm behind a screen, so people are more willing to do things that they wouldn't do in real life. And I've mentioned about the fact that there are obviously these tutorials and things like that you could potentially go and find out. But it's also about this idea that it's a challenge. Yeah? If I'm interested in tech and cyber and skills like that, actually it's a bit of a challenge to try and get in. And it's like, yes, I've achieved something. And that implication of actually what happens if I do manage to break into a network, I've broken into a network, it's great, but it's that idea of actually what is behind that. So just talking quickly about the law then. So this is a Computer Misuse Act from 1990. So I don't know if any of you guys were around in 1990.
Oh, yeah.
So this is on predates you, and this is the sort of tech that was around in that era. So we're talking, you know, literally the first handheld mobile phones, that sort of stuff, you know, which barely worked. I can remember getting the first home PC. My dad worked for IBM. It came back, it was about the size of this desk, and we could play ping pong on it, that sort of thing with the two things. It took us about 4 hours to code it to be able to do that. So I think things have moved on. But actually the legislation was pretty well written because it didn't describe what a computer was. But there's a number of sections. So section 1 is unauthorized access to computer material. So all we're talking about here is using something to be able to access a computer that doesn't belong to you or that you don't have consent to. So the idea is, you know, you look over your mate's shoulder, you can see their username and password, they go out and you use that login details to access their computer without their consent. So has anybody here gone onto their parents' device without their consent? Anyone know their parents' PIN code to get into their phone, and you've used that to get into their phone?
I know my brothers. Yeah.
Yeah. So
how old are you?
Hey?
Do you know how old he is?
How?
7.
7.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to push that to one side and carry on. Yeah, but this idea that actually, just because I know someone's username and password doesn't mean that I've got consent to access that. Yeah? Okay. So if I log on to something and start reading someone else's messages without their consent, then I'm actually committing an offence under the Computer Misuse Act. Section 2, we're now moving on a bit here. So not only have I decided to access this computer without someone's consent, I'm then going to do something with that access. So I'm going to use my friend's account, and then I'm going to go onto their Amazon account and order something that I want. So I've gone on using the unauthorized access, and then I've committed a fraud. Yeah. Section 3, this is this DDoS. Yeah. So unauthorized access with intent to impair or with recklessness to impair the operation of the machine. So I'm basically doing something, so I'm going to get something to prevent a computer from working. Yeah, so the idea I'm going to boot somebody off a game. Section 3ZA, this is where it's exactly the same sort of idea, but actually we're now looking at this serious damage. So again, when we looked at that the quiz that we've been doing in the foyer, this is where we're talking about actually this is a national infrastructure or something else like that, and we're getting into the much more serious sort of level of offending. And then the only other one is 3A, which is about actually having something for use in cybercrime. So, you know, I've obtained some malware, I've bought some software that I'm going to use to commit cybercrime, also an offence. So, didn't realise this came up like that. Some of the other consequences, obviously prison is one option, but that's, you know, right down at the other end. It's more about what actually might be the implications for you at a lower level. Might be me turning up at 8 o'clock in the morning with a knock on the door. Potentially can be looking at banned or limited internet usage. A lot of the individuals that we work with have not allowed any access to sort of university, college, school IT systems. Can impact on your ability to get a job later on. Can impact on your ability to travel. If you get convicted or get a caution for a Computer Misuse Act offence, it can definitely impact on your ability to go to certain countries like the States and things like that. We'll come in and we'll have all your devices and we'll seize them all, and then we'll keep those whilst we're investigating it, and that can be, I mean, I've got a job running at the moment that's at court in February, and we seized all the guys' equipment in 2015. So we've had it for 6 years. So you not only your devices back for 6 years, potentially. Obviously can impact on your schooling, impact on where you go next in terms of academia or career, or all of the above. Yeah. So we're talking, yeah, there is prison, but that's not really the likelihood. The likelihood is more likely to be one of these that's going to impact on you. And the other thing that we kind of work on as well is this idea of cybercrime being this victimless crime. So I've hacked into a network because I want to test my skills, and I've managed to get into this computer and I've done some stuff, and it's like, yay, that was good, I managed it, ticky box, I feel good for myself. But actually, what are the implications? And having worked with the victims of cybercrime, there's a big impact. It's not a victimless crime. So first of all, the stress that comes with things, so that physical sort of unwell of people, yeah, having run around at 3 o'clock in the morning trying to get somebody's computer network from being encrypted, massive impact, a lot of stress that goes on. And obviously with that is the emotional sort of side of it. The financial side, so if you take the school network off and you get a couple of days off school, that's funny, isn't it? Well, actually the implications are that suddenly all the school can't do all the work, there's implication from the reputation of the school, there's impact on the loss of business, that sort of side of things. And they say one in 4 businesses that get subject to a cyber attack go out of business completely. So now all the staff that did work in that company are no longer, they're now all employed. So the ramifications kind of come on, and people don't necessarily see that as the implications from just having had a bit of fun on a computer. So the other stuff we then do is trying to say, that's the bad, that's the stick, here's the carrot, and the carrot being, actually there's a wealth of opportunities out there for you guys. Games developer, you know, you can do ethical hacking, so where you're doing this white hat hacking, you know, bug bounties, that sort of thing, software engineers. So we do a lot of work trying to engage things. I don't know if anyone heard of the Matrix Challenge that we've run over the last 3-4 years now, and it should be coming out again this year. So it's like a cybersecurity sort of education stuff that we do with schools. We go down to things like EGX and stuff and try and do engagement work. From a positive career opportunity, there's also Cyber First, which is part of NCSC, looking at actually trying to get in early doors, so trailblazers and adventures sort of down at the younger ages, and then all the way up to sort of bursaries and things like that, degree opportunities. So there's funding out there for nationally for people to kind of get involved in cybersecurity. So in terms of some of our interventions and resources, we do a lot of work with ethics, sort of talking to people about, you know, what are the impacts of doing cybercrime. And then we do some interventions as well where we're trying to get people away from a computer. So some of the individuals we end up working with, maybe on the neurodiverse scale, so we're dealing with people with, you know, extra additional needs, so trying to get them away from just sitting in front of a computer, which is their life, and actually saying here is, you know, some better skills and things. In Leeds, we do a lot of work with a company called Geeks Room, so they're like an in-person coding club, so we'll kind of get people out, getting people engaged. But there's a load of online sort of resources and things where people can use their interests from a legal perspective. So we have immersive labs, Hack the Box, these sort of places where we can actually go and test our skills and learn in an environment that's not going to cause other people problems. Okay, so. So that's kind of the presentation I pulled together for today. So we've kind of got a little bit of time left, I think. So has anybody got any questions or anything that you want to ask of us? And everyone suddenly becomes silent.
Can I ask a little bit, not necessarily about the cyber choice,
Yeah.
but more about your career and how you got into that?
Yeah.
A couple of students are looking at getting cyber security. I know the police, it's changed slightly, and like usually you have to do probably a bit. Is that the same with cyber security?
So within the policing, obviously I went off to university, did chemistry at university, and then kind of halfway through my degree went, I'm not really a fan of chemistry, and thought that I was then going to become a scenes of crime officer. That was my plan, and then I sort of joined the police. So I joined under the old scheme. So I did a number of years in uniform, driving around in panda cars, and then went into CID. But people have realised actually that the opportunities within policing are now much more diverse. You don't need to join as a uniformed police officer, in terms of there are sort of ways to come in straight as a detective. We've got specific careers within digital forensics, within digital media investigators that you can come sort of straight into that sort of investigative function. From a cyber security point of view, we do a lot of work with universities. We've got an intern program as well. So we have people coming to work with us for a year on an intern basis and things like that. And we've just been at University of Hull last week, sort of talking about our latest intern program and things like that. So there are a number of opportunities out there outside of just kind of like policing being this idea that you're in a uniform driving a panda car around. There's a lot more opportunities out there.